So, Harmeet, there seems to be two arguments here, that private businesses can do what they want and require vaccination of their employees, but this is a different situation in the sense that the mayor of New York is mandating that businesses have this system in place or people can't go to work.
Well, both of these things are hugely problematic, Katie. On the private front, we have all kinds of laws that protect citizens against discrimination by employers and by places of business. These laws are being ignored with respect to this new vaccine mandate, which is we've never had before for adults in this country, which violates religious liberties and the rights of people of their conscience, their protection over their own body, as well as medical issues. Now, when the government mandates it, it's 100 times worse. We have a significant racial disparity, just to make one point about this vaccine situation. Only about 33 or 35% of African Americans in New York City are vaccinated, and they are being shut out from businesses, from travel, from being able to work out. This is unconstitutional. The government doesn't have the right, doesn't have the police power, for the most part, to do this kind of thing. There isn't even a rational basis for it. We now know in recent days that vaccination status is not necessarily a proxy for either safety or for non-communicability. And so I think this is a civil rights crisis of our time in the United States, and we need citizens to stand up. I mean, you may make the choice to be vaccinated. Most Americans are doing that. But the fact that people are being forced into it is tyranny. It is contrary to the very founding of our Constitution in this country. And if we let it pass for this issue, I guarantee the governments, federal, state, and local, are going to be imposing further mandates on all kinds of issues, and we cannot tolerate this, Katie.
Well, speaking of mandates and tyranny, of course, we saw this week President Joe Biden expanding this attack on private property rights through the CDC by expanding this eviction moratorium that the Supreme Court said was unconstitutional. So, Attorney General, I mean, we've seen the federal government overstep in things like shutting down churches, shutting down businesses. We've seen state governments do that as well. And now we're seeing the federal government through the CDC telling landlords in places like Arizona that they are not allowed to collect rent.
You know, Katie, it's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Suggestions. And property rights are so fundamental to our Constitution because, once again, the framers understood the relationship between protecting private property and freedom, especially political freedom. And we have, as Madison said, rights in our property and property in our rights. And so we know the Biden administration, even the president himself, has talked about the fact that they think what they're doing is constitutionally suspect, but they want to get out as much money as possible, because I would submit to you this is all part of a plan to undermine the laboratories of democracy, that is the 50 states, concentrate power in Washington, D.C., and get more and more people dependent on the federal government. And that's why it's incumbent on all of us, especially the AGs, especially state officials, to stand up and push back against the Biden administration, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or independent, because once you cede that power to the federal government, you're never getting it back. As Ronald Reagan used to talk about, there is no more permanent thing than a temporary government program. And once you transfer that power, we're never getting it back as Americans.
Yeah, I mean, this is turning into, like you said, a civil rights crisis. This is not just about vaccination, unvaccination. This is about being forced by the federal government to do X, Y, or Z. And it seems like the end is never. And when it comes to this attack on private property, if they can do this on private property rights, what's to say that the CDC can't go off after issues like gun control for the sake of public health, or issues like climate change for the sake of public health? Right now they're doing it under the guise of COVID. But where does that end? And what is the situation with the president openly saying, I know this may not pass constitutional muster, after already been told by the Supreme Court it's not constitutional, and yet here we are with them pushing forward on it?
Oh, this is a huge problem. For one thing, the CDC is not a legislature. The CDC is not the government. The CDC doesn't have the right to make up crimes, which they're doing in this recent legislation. To be very clear, the federal government has almost no police power over our daily lives. That's in the states, as the Attorney General stated, and it's at the local level. So this is completely farcical, and this is the type of thing that actually is an impeachable offense, in my opinion, to ignore a co-equal branch of government, which has clearly stated that this is not constitutional, and to just go ahead and do it anyway. And if we let this stand, it will be the first of many. And so, yes, we don't want the federal government telling us who can go to school under what circumstances, property rights, all kinds of issues that are local to the states, criminal sanctions for different types of crimes, the death penalty. all of this. So this has been a longstanding plan, I think, of Democrats. You see Democrat Congress people who know that they can't make these types of changes in their own states. So they're just camping out and making scenes in the Capitol and trying to get things done by fiat at the federal level with no consideration of all the families who own property and who are struggling themselves to make ends meet, who are being broken by these mandates. So like I said, it may not affect you. You may not be a landlord. You may not care. But this is the beginning of a very dangerous precedent. And we are going to see, I think, if this continues, we're going to see some significant unrest. Hundreds or thousands of people have contacted me about these vaccine mandates. They are absolutely desperate to be able to control their own bodies and their own lives. And the government's taking that away from them. We can't let this proceed.
Absolutely. As you said, it's a battle, and certainly we will continue to follow it. Arizona Attorney General Brnovich and Harmeet Dillon, thank you both so much for your expertise and insight. We appreciate it.